Yo, we are talking about social media and its impact on education and your kids on the other side.
Audio Jungle.
Oh, welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Jubilee, that's David. Omar is off somewhere being a superhero, probably in a different country, different stratosphere, maybe a different planet. I have no idea. But I'm always jealous of the adventures that my friend Omar can go on. Missed you all last week, but I'm happy to be back, and I'm very happy for our fearless leader today, young David, to be leading on this topic. So, David, I will hand it over to you. You take over and do whatever check-ins need to be done. I'm obviously on the road, so I will apologize in advance if I have spotty internet. But David, I'm putting you in a command seat, and it's all
right.
you, brother.
Cool. Thank you, Charles, Dr. Cole. So we are here today. This is episode 99, I believe. So we're hitting 100 next week of the South Star Classroom. And so that's a milestone. And today we are going to dive into the issue of young people and social media and education, what schools can do, what families should be doing, and what young people can do to safeguard themselves. It's a big topic. But before we do that, I want to thank everybody that's here in the audience. Make sure that you add your comments and questions. Let's make it as interactive as possible during the show. If you're following us on social media, make sure to like and share to increase our followers and our community. And with that said, we will jump into, and I also want to apologize. I feel dressed down. Jubilee and Charles are definitely, they got the upgraded attire on. Charles is looking, you're looking pretty good today, Charles. So we're going to start with you. Why you're coming to us from a hotel room? You're dressed like, you're looking fly. So what's happening?
Man, I appreciate that. I don't know how I'll be looking any other time, but thank you. I'm going to just take the compliment that was there, not the insult that was lurking in this.
Come on, man.
You look like riffraff any other time. No, man, I am in Austin. I'm at the National Charter School Convention. You all know I do a lot of research. David and I and Omar have done some together, and we presented that before. This time, myself and my writing partner, Kamara Gwynn, wrote a report about studying the characteristics of high-performing charter schools that are led by HBCU grads. And we had a full house today. We had, I think the room was, holds 200 plus, and it was filled to capacity. And we got to, explore that research. We got to really go into the history of just Black education in this country. And I think it was pretty good. And that was done in partnership with Charter School Growth Fund. So just want to thank them. And then I'm here tomorrow night, and I will be speaking. I will be a special guest of honor speaking and honoring the life and legacy of one Dr. Howard Fuller, who is an academic and educational father to me, who has done some incredible work in this field. The reason that it says Dr. Cole is because when I even first got the offer, he was the first call that I made, and him and his wife told me I had to do it. So I'm just glad he's around and we get to honor him, and he gets to, hear it and see it. So, and after that, I need to sleep. I need a nap. And then I will be home for a few days and then back on the road. I am on the road pretty much all summer, which is a blessing. And so that is why I have this on. I came straight from giving that talk, and it's a nice brisk 105 degrees here in Austin today. So, fun stuff.
Man, stay hydrated.
If I was in shape, I would not have a shirt on anywhere today. It just wouldn't happen. I don't care who'd be uncomfortable. Yes. So thank the good Lord that Charles is not in great shape.
All right. Thank you for that check-in, Dr. Cole. we will go to Jubilee next, who's also coming off a road trip of sorts. So how are you doing, Jubilee?
Amazing. I'm doing amazing. I should be tired, and I think that I am. But on this road trip, we made a pit stop, went to Dunkin' Donuts, and found out that the barista put in 3 shots of espresso that I didn't order in my drink. And so I'll probably be up straight till Friday or next week's episode of the South Star Classroom. So that's great. 100th episode. Excited about that. But yes, got to go to New York to surprise my daddy for Father's Day and to also see my grandma who's on this side of the world because she lives in London. So that was lovely. We barbecued. We played Uno. We ate all of the things. I did the vegan or the pescatarian version, of course. And it was just great family time. It was great family time. And my father was very surprised. So that was the whole point.
Excellent. Awesome. Let's see, down here, we finished school last week. So we're in summertime mode. It's pretty amazing. My son's going to be in the 8th grade next year. So he's got one more year and then high school. And it feels like it's gone by very quickly. And as much as people kind of hype up the middle school years, and of course, it's never smooth for everybody. We are just blessed that we've gotten by 2 years, generally, I would say a positive experience at our school. So shout out to the staff at my kid's school. His teachers got a really nice note from one of his teachers, kind of a personalized note that she sent to him. It was very simple. It's at the end of the year, school's out, and you email a nice note to your student, right? And it just, he really lit up when he saw it. So shout out to them. We got one more year and then we're in the big leagues, high school. So that's what's happening.
I'm so proud of little David. I feel very old every time you update me on little David. I feel like I remember little David being very, very little David. And now
you do, man. That little kid I was carrying in that picture.
You're gonna be talking about prom. You're gonna be like, oh, Charles, David needs an intern. I mean, my little one, I know his name is, I just like calling him little David, but he needs an internship. And I'll be like, how old is he's supposed to be 8? He's not 8 anymore. So
no, man, no, he's 13 going on 16. So
I need him to stop because when he gets older, that means the rest of us are getting older. So
exactly.
What's wrong with getting older?
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be another topic, future show. Okay, let's so today we are talking about social media and the adolescent brain. And so the first thing I want to do is kind of cover some basics. We're not going to get like too brainy into it. I want to keep it high level. I want this show to be useful for everybody. I need it to be useful for me as a parent. And it should be something that everybody can kind of understand because we are here in the modern age. And what we are talking about today is a recent report that came out. It's called Social Media and Youth Mental Health. It's put out by the Surgeon General. It's pretty fresh. It's fresh off the platter. And I will just explain to you quickly before we dive in what it says in a nutshell. So we're talking about social media use by youth. 95% of young people, that's categorized as 13 to 17. So basically every young person, almost, except for 5%, report using a social media platform, with more than a third saying they use it almost constantly. And that is fundamentally different from the way that previous generations have grown up in terms of like stimuli and information. Although age 13 is commonly required as a minimum age to join social media platforms, we all know it's pretty easy to dupe these systems. So nearly 40% of children aged 8 to 12, before the actual age when they can join, are already on social media. 8 years old to 12, right? Those are some very high level statistics that are, frightening, to be quite honest, to me, when we talk about young people. And I know part of it is it exploded with the pandemic and lockdowns. So that's definitely part of it. So that's what usage looks like. We're not talking about any one social media app in particular. We're kind of throwing them all together. And out of this report, and what is generally accepted as some of the universal concerns around social media, are the following. Number one, cyberbullying is a big one, right? And I've dealt with that as a principal. I've dealt with that as a parent. I've dealt with that as a teacher. I'm sure you all dealt with it. It's a very real thing. Cyberbullying is essentially, it's traditional bullying, but it's done, using social media platforms to target and harass others. The interesting thing about cyberbullying is, while it may not happen at school, it can happen after hours. The bullying, the impact of the bullying is felt at school. So it still becomes a school issue. And all the emotional and psychological effects that come along with it. Number two, privacy and online safety. So making sure, that young people are not oversharing, and that platforms have safeguards in place for that. So privacy and online safety. Young people may not fully understand the consequences of sharing personal information online. Makes them vulnerable to identity theft, stalking, and other online threats. And that's real. We've had that happen here in our home, which is a very interesting situation. And I generally consider myself aware. Mental health issues is number three, which is a big one. Just the wear and tear that comes along with ongoing social media use, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, right? Explosion of that happening. People trying to, stay up with the group, right? Keep that image up, keep the appearance up of living a particular lifestyle, when in reality, only a very small percentage of people actually exist in that lifestyle. But everybody's kind of, pushing in that direction, and that creates a lot of pressure. Number four is exposure to inappropriate content. So, maybe you don't have access to the full web, but any social media outlet for a young person can expose them to, all kinds of things that can have an impact on their ability to form relationships, body image issues, societal norms, et cetera, in a negative way. And then the last one is the issue of addiction and time management. So excessive use of social media can lead to addiction-like behaviors, poor time management, spending way too much time on social media can interfere with, obviously schoolwork, also physical activities, face-to-face, real-life human connections that are all crucial for healthy, brain and emotional development. So those are 5 very big points that I just put out there: cyberbullying, online safety and privacy, mental health issues, exposure to inappropriate content, addiction, and time management. And going back to the numbers that I shared, what we know is basically all young people are on social media between the ages of 13 and 17, and 40% of young people on social media between the ages of 8 and 12. So that is the big picture. That's the big data set and some of the issues that are coming out of the study. So we'll pause there, and I wanted to see if you had any reflections on that and or any questions on what I just presented.
Ladies first.
Yeah.
Charles is so kind. Initial thoughts. Whoa.
Yeah.
Grateful for the research, but not surprised by it. And I don't know why Who's the Master kept on playing in my head in terms of how I navigate this whole social media thing in my household, I reserve the right to be the master of your phone. Your phone and everything on it actually is mine because I pay the bill, and I'm also responsible for your development, right? And so me just reflecting on like how I sort of lay the groundwork in my home has a lot to do with me holding the reins here. And it's not easy because I think there's a lot of temptations. All my friends are doing it, all my friends are on it. But I actually just put my 13-year-old on a social media hiatus because he posted something that I thought, and it wasn't even egregious, but I just thought it was irresponsible. And so what I say to them is, I will give you freedom based on the level of responsibility that you show, that you demonstrate. Like that trust and that level of responsibility is earned, So so I really do think my first initial thought is, as a parent, you got to parent and hold the reins, and it's hard because it's everywhere and all the kids are doing it. But that's about the only way to sort of control the flow. So that I'll start there. I have a lot more that I could say, but I'll start there.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, initial thoughts, impressions, questions.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this before. I mean, I think 30 and 40 years from now, I think people are going to judge us for allowing kids to just be able to use social media. I think it's going to be on par with a Schedule I drug. I truly, truly do. I think, it's like I started out as a psych major, and then you like in psychology class as a freshman, and you read about, Freud used to like prescribe cocaine. Like, it's like, you just give cocaine out, right? Like, it's used to be in Coca-Cola, right? It's like, that can't be real. I think that I am glad that official studies are starting to happen on like social media reconnects and retrains your brain. There are young people, and not just young people. Let me just also say this. This stuff isn't just for young people. This is like old people. I mean, this shit depresses me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a very depressing thing. And I think that it can be. And even though it's been a tool of liberation and freedom for me, as far as my entrepreneurship and things are like concerned, right? Like, I've had to just step away from a lot of things in a lot of different ways. That level of access, like access to you is a gift. And I think that this generation is growing up feeling very different, or understanding that while everybody deserves a voice, different voices there should be different levels of parity. So, my reactions to that, and just the notes that I wrote down, man, I think social media creates a false sense of reality for young people. I think it distorts everything. You're not really seeing people in their real forms in any kind of way, whether it's a filter or it's their PR persona that they've put on for people. And I think what's going to be very devastating for young people is like, it robs a lot of us of our humanity in a lot of different ways. And like you talked about the bullying or just being able to talk about people with no consequences. And also there's this self-righteous notion that I think a lot of young people are expressing because they're very young. So they're judging people that they see online very harshly, right? Like if somebody is in the news for something, or somebody is accused of something, or, it's like, you're innocent till proven guilty, but that things have kind of been flipped. And what happens is it's not if they make a mistake in life, it's when they make a mistake in life, they're not going to know how to process that. I think this is partially why suicide rates and suicide attempts are so much higher, especially in young communities, because they've been so judgmental along the way that now they feel like, well, I'm going to be exposed, or this thing is going to happen to me. And if you all haven't watched it, Black Mirror just had a new season, and in it, they actually address this. It's the first episode. It's called Joan is Awful. And it's basically talking about the merging of social media, AI, and streaming services, where it's like, it is basically following a regular person around throughout their day and then turning it into a show that night. And the world is judging that person, and it drives them crazy. So,
wow.
When we talk about these things, there's a very grim future that's on the horizon. And it sucks because the internet and social media can be such a gift, but that sword stabs both ways, and we have to be careful.
Yep. let me read a little bit more from this study. I just picked up a couple more headlines connected to what you were both saying earlier. So essentially what we're talking about is brain development, right? So brain development between the ages of 10 and 19, which is generally considered, the domain of adolescence. It's a highly sensitive period of brain development. And I also know this because I was the head of school at a Montessori TK through 8 program. And Montessori is based on 3-year cycles of brain development, right? So primary, lower, upper elementary. It's 3 years of students together based on how the brain develops, right? So there's a science behind it. So this is the period when risk-taking behaviors reach their peak, when well-being experiences the greatest fluctuations, and when mental health challenges such as depression typically emerge. In early adolescence, when identities of sense of self-worth are forming, brain development is essentially susceptible to social pressures, peer opinions, and peer comparison. Now, those things all happen in the real and analog world, but they are amplified in the online world, right? And that's why we're talking about this today. We all went through this as young people. Charles, I'm sure you did. Jubilee, I'm sure you did. But we probably dealt with it more in a face-to-face context, not this like hyper online context. Let's see. So getting even more scientific now, I'll say this because it's important. Frequent social media use may also be associated with distinct changes in the developing brain of the amygdala, right, and the prefrontal cortex, and could increase sensitivity to social rewards and punishments. So here, what they're saying is essentially backing up what Charles said earlier. It's actually changing the wiring of the brain, which is, it's pretty intense. And so I'll leave the scientific talk there. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. So we're talking about social media platforms, and all they are it's technology, right? It's code, and you can change code, you can manipulate code. So a good example of what I want to bring forward now is like TikTok, right? TikTok is an app, right? It's worldwide. It's probably at the forefront of this issue that we're talking about. But based on what I know, TikTok usage changes across different countries. So if you use TikTok in the US, it's pretty much an open format for all kinds of hot mess. But if you're a TikTok user in China, where the technology was developed, it's controlled in a very different way. So the government actually has pretty strict controls over it, and you don't see a lot of the content that you would see if you're using the same platform in the US, right? So point being is these things are not created, by any supernatural power. They're created by human beings, and we can control and manipulate them for good as well. But I think here, maybe this study will, change some behavior, change some kind of government policy to put more pressure on the actual tech companies that run these platforms. So have either of you heard of this thing that's happening with TikTok and how it's different in China versus the US?
Censor, baby. They don't.
Right.
It's super censored. I mean, and I think you know that I just left this board, but I was on the UCSF Benioff board, and on that board with me, sits the man who helped build out the financial model for Facebook. And he has a documentary now. He's kind of left that and moved on and done some other things. He went to Pinterest. He done a lot of stuff, but he doesn't let his children touch social media, and most of them don't. I mean, it is programmed in a specific way, right? That's how the algorithm is programmed, and it's programmed to tighten itself up. So I just think it's interesting, man. I think it's a really interesting thing. So again, Schedule 1 drug. It probably wouldn't be called that, but they might create a new category, because anything that can transform your brain, let's entangle it the way that Schedule 1 drugs can. I don't think it should be trifled with, man.
Yep. Okay, so let's get into some of the different levels of what can be done about this. Let's talk about schools, and I know this opens up a whole other like can of worms around, and we can talk about it as well. I was thinking about bringing in the cell phone in schools piece, but there's PCs and Apple computers and Chromebooks obviously all over schools. So what, given what we know, what roles do schools play both in, I'll just leave it there, open-ended. What role do schools play, educational systems play in addressing this issue?
I mean, I honestly, I think it starts at home. I think schools have been doing what they've been doing all these years, which is blocking these sites, having these firewalls up so not every site can get through, and notifying parents if there's something that's inappropriate, or notifying school leadership, if there's something that maybe needs to be tightened up because something slipped through that shouldn't have been, allowed through. But at the same time, these children that we are raising now and that are in schools now usually have devices, and they are on those devices far more than they would be a school, a Chromebook or what have you. So I think really I'll have more to say when you talk about the parenting in the home, because I think the school is the middle ground. And honestly, if I kind of feel the same way about like social media and Chat GPT, right? It's like, these things, they're so evil, they're promoting evil, right? Or they're so good, they're promoting good. And it's like, how do we find the balance? Because they're here to stay. And so I think schools should definitely, figure out ways in which to incorporate that safely. But that's about all I have to say for schools and what they can do.
Charles.
I mean, I think, I think it's interesting, man. I hear what Jude was saying. I agree. I'll double click on that. I think, but the cat's out the bag, man. That the toothpaste has left, the tube, and you can't put it back in. So now is what you're gonna do now, right? Like again, there's a writer strike that's happening. The last writer strike cost Hollywood billions of dollars. And this one will probably cost a lot more. And one of the things that they're trying to fight for, right, is that Chat GPT or that type of AI technology won't be able to replace them, or they won't be able to, step in there. And some of the most strong supporters are looking at their union and being like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to, if we're gonna be able to fight this one, because how do you stop it? But I think that you have to adapt. And how do we adapt as a people around this, right? Like what are the safeguards that we make? And Jubilee brought up home, Miss Toya in the comments brought up home, and I think that part of the home thing is send your damn kids outside. Now let me give parents some actual smoke that they deserve. This generation, I know I was raised in the 80s and 90s, and David, I know you was around the 70s or whatnot. Jubilee, in my world, you were outside 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? You do not state a lady's age, right? But those generations, we had to go outside. We had to go play outside. And I think that things got so scary in the 90s and 2000s, right, that parents stopped sending their kids outside. They stopped forcing them to play. I was from a generation where you begged your mom to let you go outside and play. Like you begged for it. And now you can't get kids away from a screen. And so some of this stuff, it wasn't just AI, and it wasn't just social media, and it wasn't just technology alone. The ways that people parent shifted, and it changed, and that sense of adventure and all that stuff is done. I played ball, man, and I honed my basketball skills on basketball courts, right? And now kids have trainers. Kids are doing AAU like from like 7 and 8 years old. You know what I'm saying? It's just very different. And so there has to be, the equilibrium is off, and that stuff has to start somewhere. And now when this happens, I tend to look at what the most powerful and the richest people tend to do. And the most powerful and richest people have started to limit their kids' screen time or deny it altogether, or send them to places where they're not doing any of that stuff. Like some of these places are going back to old school, like calculators, right? So, I think that, not to just babble on and dribble on, David, but I think that it's really important, because it's easy to always blame and say this and this and this. But we aided and abetted, man. We when I was a kid, man, I grew up in Oakland, David. AC Transit, bro. I could get anywhere in the Bay Area between AC Transit bus line and the BART. If you had a bus pass at 13 years old, you could explore. And I have nephew. I'm not gonna put my nephew on the spot like that, but there are like young people that are 16, 17, 18, 19 that don't know how to get around our city without using their parents' Uber account. And so, one of the beautiful things about living in a city like that is being able to have access to public transportation and do stuff. So, I know it's a scary world, man, but if you think this is scary, you really ain't been in them social media streets, which can get really scary.
I agree, and I think that it's the other part of that. I think is the aiding and abetting is that you got kids to be quiet, like when you ain't want to talk no more. Like you just you allow. So you ever heard that term? It's like, oh, we're allowing social media and TV and games to babysit our children, right? For some parents, right, and for a myriad of reasons, whether you're working 2 jobs or you got a real stressful job, or you have a child with special needs and this is the only thing that keeps them focused, so you can get in that, make dinner, go to the right. So it's just like, I think
do that podcast. Do
what
that
happened?
podcast.
Right.
Do your podcast. Right. But I just think that, like, in so many ways, to your point, Charles, like the parenting has shifted and there are things that are now standing in its stead, such as social media. And it's like, I agree. Like, how do we get the balance back, right? And I agree, right? My kids go outside. They go outside. They came home last week. I was like, all right, we're playing Scattergory. They're like, what's this? I'm like, sit down. We're gonna play. I'm gonna teach you, right? Like Scattergories. I don't know. So I just think it really is about balance. It's not going anywhere, but I think it does take some self evaluation and some self awareness as a parent to be like, where have I let this go a little too far, a little too long? Where can I draw it back? Because I do agree that it's too much. It's too much. Not in my household, but I think it's too much.
And David, before you go, can I briefly just address Ms. Toya? Because first off, just thank you for being here, Miss Mama Toya. I love me some Toya. That woman loves me. I just want to just say that she loves me, good and the bad days. So thank you, Toya. I will say this, and I get that notion. First off, living in Chicago and Paducah and Oakland in the 90s was very, very hood and very dangerous. So I understand what you're saying. I mean, we still went outside, but I'm more so talking about the idea of outside. So Jubilee gave an example that I was going to give, right? You can do things together as a family. So maybe instead of you being on that screen, y'all playing Monopoly, or there's there's a board game, there's talking, there's a communication. The point is that there has to be some apparatus, some type of set of activities that is mandated by parents that are teaching you those social skills and how to interact, how to lose, how to that is not attached to a screen, that's not attached to an algorithm, that's not attached to a filter. And there were many days when I was on punishment, I had to play on the porch, play on the stoop, or whatever the case was, and not be able to go, or go right out back. I played basketball. I could dribble a ball for hours, right? And as a kid, man, we made up a lot of games. And I think that leads to a lot of my creativity. I think that being able to do more with less has actually proven so successful for me in business. And I would say my business partners and David and Kamar and Omar and soon Jubilee, I think that they have seen that, right? Like, oh, give me a little bit. I actually tend to do better when I have less than when I have a lot, because you're limited by it. Because a crate was a milk cart was like a basketball court. You know what I'm saying? Like an extension cord or an old phone cord was like some jump rope or double dutch rope for the girls in my neighborhood, right? Like, so I just think that you have to, and you had to interact, and you had to fight, and you had to make up, and you had to, learn those rules of the playground and stuff. And now we are wondering why so many people are afraid to talk to other people, or afraid to meet other people, or knowing how to interact, or knowing how to deal with things, and or knowing how to deal with bullies when bullies actually happen in real life, because they still exist. So, David, I ain't mean to take that extra liberty.
No, it's
but I still got one more, Dave. Can I just give one more?
Yeah, no, go for it. Go for it.
About the schools.
Yeah, so, and before you do that,
yes.
Thank you everybody for the comments. Keep the comments coming. This is good. Go ahead.
I'm going back to when I was principal, because because Charles said double dutch at the same time it appeared in my brain. Because when I was principal, right, and of course, you know, the infamous lunch duty outside on the playground, and the kids are running around smacking each other, and they just were weird. Like, wait, no one knows what to do at recess. What is going on? You're like, I was like, what? Ah! And so I had to watch for a little bit just to see what's going on. I'm like, oh, they are not used to interacting this way. They are used to being in front of these computers and these devices. They don't have these social skills. They don't even have, like, you know, conflict resolution skills. Oh, he hit me. I'm like, oh, it's just gonna drive me nuts. And so I'm like, I went back to the 80s and I went back to the 90s, and I thought, well, what did we do? We had click clackers, we had sunflower seeds, and we had double dutch. And if you couldn't jump double dutch, we had single, right? And we had, you know, there were other games, basketball, soccer, what have you. So I went and I Googled and found a national double dutch team that came, and I was able to do a contract with them, and they came, and we started now they're all over the place winning national competitions, a double dutch squad at the school, right? And then we got some other people in there, whether it was yoga, a violin teacher, robotics, or what have you. So I do think that that's something the school can do, just invest in those types of extracurricular activities that pull students into something that's engaging, that does not necessarily involve being in front of the screen. And lastly, before you go, identity, the cyberbullying and all of that kind of stuff, it goes back to home, and I think school can partner with this as well. We got to tell our babies who they are. I'm not a parent that believes, or a human that believes you just kind of let children be born and then it just sprout up and become. I believe in affirmations and speaking life and speaking positivity. And I think that if we allow children to access social media before they have a strong core to know that they're beautiful, bold, and brilliant, and all these things, they're going to get it from social media. And there's not always somebody on social media telling you those things. So now you have a weight issue at 5. Now you think you're overweight at 5. Now you think you're ugly because you don't look like this. But like Charles said earlier, everybody's using the filter, so they don't even look like that, but you're comparing yourself. So that identity, we're responsible for helping our children navigate that and walk into healthy self-esteem.
Yep. So yeah, that's great. We're getting into the realm of like the home and the community, and let's do that. I think for schools, the only thing I would add is making sure. I mean, this is going to sound very boilerplate, but for schools, making sure that they have their online web systems and devices, in some kind of a lockdown manner, so students have limited access. They don't have full access to the World Wide Web. Although young people are smart, they're going to figure it out, right? They've been doing it for a long time. And that there's actual curriculum out there. There's like social media, not social media, like digital citizenship, which includes social media curriculum out there. People like Common Sense Media, other organizations where you can have those conversations starting in like elementary school. And associated with that is like doing parent community workshops, bringing parents in too, because I consider myself to be pretty tech savvy, but the what did you say, the toothpaste has left the tube already in my home, and I'm behind. My kid is trying to build his own Raspberry whatever computer PC rig, and I'm like, what are you doing? Are you making a bomb? He's like, no, it's just a PC. I'm like, I don't know, man. And so that's real. I think those are some things that schools can do, providing education. I want to read this other piece, which you both got me thinking about. This is like the larger kind of universal theme of like getting kids outside. We don't want them to go outside because it's like a scary world out there, which I recognize. I mean, I grew up in a scary place, and I've lived in scary places with a lot of violence. However, I think the social media thing feeds into it, both for young people and adults, how our psychology works. So this is a separate piece. It's an opinion piece about brain bias, the bias that our brain produces, right? With stimuli, mainly meaning information coming in and from news and social media. So 2 well-established psychological phenomena combine to produce an illusion of moral decline, right? First, there's bias exposure. People, meaning us, predominantly encounter and pay attention to negative information about others and things. Mischief, misdeeds make the news and dominate our conversations and our social media feeds, right? It's coming in, it's coming in. It's all bad, it's all bad. Second, there's a biased memory piece to this. The negativity of negative information fades faster than the positivity of positive information. Getting dumped, for instance, hurts in the moment, but as you rationalize, reframe, and distance yourself from the memory, the sting fades. The memory of meeting your current spouse or partner, on the other hand, probably still makes you smile. So there's this psychology piece that is embedded within this social media piece that we're talking about for young people and adults. And in reality, it's very easy to argue that things are actually not as bad as we think that they are, but we perceive them to be worse than they are. But we still act according to our perceptions, right? You don't want to let your kids outside. You don't want to let your kids go hang out with somebody else, and because their parents might be weirdos or whatever, they're going to kidnap your kids. And so I think there's work for a lot of people to do. I think for adults, we're talking about young people, but for adults too, parents, people working in schools, to just realize, like, I think we all need this moment to sit back and kind of reflect and be like, we need to get a grip collectively, right? If we're going to raise children in a world that we want them to, where they can thrive, right? Because they can sense your fear, they can sense your they can sense all of that, right? And they feed off of that. So I wanted to just add that in there. I dropped that piece in the chat if both of you want to look at it. I thought it was connected. So here we are, 3:42. And let's talk about the home, right? What we touched on it already, but like, what needs to happen in the home around these particular issues? And so, and I know some of it is definitely tied to resources, right? If you live in an inner city where there's more crime, more violence, you're going to be less likely to let your kid go out and play. But there are alternatives. If you are a single parent or two parents that are working, full-time jobs, not at home, you children need supervision. So how does that work, right? And so let's go there. This is all like thinking about ways of getting kids off of computers, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think as an independent mother, I've had to seek out a lot of different resources, and I think that there's power in community, right? Other parents that initially can just serve as either a sounding board, could connect you to other resources that are in the community at large. Community centers, sometimes they have different programs and things like that. Mentorship, I know it sounds old school, but like, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club or Big Brother, Big Sister, really just trying to seek out opportunities and connection for community wherever you are. I think that's what I have the most experience with as a parent who has needed really healthy, positive places for my sons to be, or have referred parents, when I was in school leadership. I think too, like, and I know that I know that everyone doesn't have this at home, right? If you're in a single parent home and you don't always have time, maybe you're not always able to sit and kind of chat with your child. But I think that having conversations with your child and trying to build that community at home, even if it's just 2 of you or 3 of you or however many, can serve as a buffer for or a filter for all of the different pieces of information that can come at a child in a day. So if a former student of mine would come to me, or if one of my children comes to me, it's like, mommy, the world is flat. And it's like, oh, really? Like, where'd you get that? Oh, I saw it on TikTok. Okay, and what are your other sources? Like, what are your other sources, right? But like, I think that's part of our responsibility, like as the adults in the lives of our children, whether they are students or our own children, to serve as that buffer, because I'm constantly pushing my children to critically think about the information that they're taking in.
Yep.
And then the other thing I'll say, so that's community, right? Just us kind of standing in the gap to serve as that buffer and filter. And then I thought always, why do I do that? And then I forget my third point. Take it away, Charles.
It'll come back.
I'll come back when I remember.
Nah, man, it's all good. Don't worry about it. Don't put that pressure on yourself. I think, you know, and I get this thing. And listen, y'all, like financial situations and all that stuff. I mean, it's always gonna be in the background, but this the one where I got to push back, right? Because I grew up dumbass poor, like dumb poor, like, you know what I'm saying, like government cheese poor. With like my grandmother and when my parents was in and out, man, and we didn't have it wasn't a bunch there, man. But even when she was like crocheting at night, right? It's like she just was like she loved crocheting, and she forced me to learn how to crochet with her. Just kind of say, or I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to be around her, and I just took an interest in something that she did. I think it's just it don't take money to be able to talk to your kid. Like I can give you. There's a lot of excuses for a lot of things that are very, very valid. You know what I mean? But I think, you know, I have a very different financial situation now, but some of my happiest moments came when I was the poorest and came when things were like the worst. Learn how to play spades with my family, or learning how, you know, to play like Uno with my grandmother, or just her just talking to me, or just telling me about her own childhood, or listening to something like that. Like there's like you can be your kids YouTube, man. You can be your kids like Twitter, like learn how to have, you know what I'm saying, that conversation. And I think I can't crochet well. I can loop it in. I don't want to take too much.
I'm waiting for my socks at Christmas, Charles.
Yeah, they'll come from Nike. So like I think but you know, even in living in places like I lived in a place, Paducah, Kentucky, which was very poor, but it's Kentucky, so there's horses. Like I know I can ride a horse, and Toya was talking about this in the comments. But it's like there are things that's offered for free in your area too. If you go look, like your local library, which is stand on his last leg, always has a list of things and public work stuff that's kind of out there. They can't give away enough museum tickets, right? Like and whatever it is in your town, in your place. If you somebody that likes to fix cars, like some people's favorite memories is like going outside with their father in the garage and like getting under a hood together. I'm just saying, and there's always a reason, an excuse that can be validated and all this stuff. It be seen as punching down when you say it, man. But love can just shine through. And I say this as an addict to these devices. I am very good on these devices. I have built these shows. I have created things, and a large chunk of my work, I use these devices. They're very helpful, and I'm grateful for them. I love YouTube. I learned so much on YouTube and the way young people learn on TikTok. And there has to be a time when you reconnect with the real world. It just has to be. And some stuff it's just very easy to blame stuff on other people, but for the seed that you're responsible for the people that you love, and even for yourself, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, look, man, we take extra pains to say like, yo, we know people poor and this, that, and the third. But from my understanding, for the most part, I think most of the people that on this podcast have some very humble beginnings. Like I've heard David talk about his parents that have a farming background, like that have like, you know, backgrounds that like interconnect with like the struggles of Cesar Chavez and things like that. Like there's a lot of people, man, that raise their kids in the fields, you know what I'm saying, and had to and they were migrant workers, right? Or kids that grew up in Detroit and their parents were factory workers, man. And then people still, you know what I'm saying, pass that stuff down to their kids, you know, like. How many of us grew up in towns where you heard a chicken or something, or a rooster, like because somebody on that street was growing that stuff on their own? And living in Kentucky, I saw that all the time, right? Or and then East Oakland, somebody got a chicken right now on the street, or a turkey on the street in East Oakland. So I you know, I know there's a lot of outs and there's a lot of grace that we can give people, and I need a whole bunch of grace too, but I just wanted to push back on that. Just not on the people that said it, but man, there's so much stuff that you can pass down that you know that will be real cool to your kid. They might even front on you a little bit, but 20 years from now, they're gonna be telling something, man, my daddy or my mama did this, man, and I remember it forever.
Yeah, I'm one of those kids. I was a latchkey kid.
Same here.
You know, but my mom, you know, she didn't send us outside because, you know, there was also gunshots at the end of the block. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I was in the school choir. for as long as I can remember. We went on trips here, there, and everywhere. We had family picnics. You know, we played dodgeball in the park. We did a lot of, you know, things together. At school, I was in the science club, future problem solver club, the student government, anything that, you know, the school offered, like I was a part of. So I understand what you mean. And one quote that I would always share with my parents coming in was that it's going to be your presence. It's always going to be your presence that matters more than your GPA or how many degrees you have, right? And so I really do think, you know, maybe this is a way that we welcome history repeating itself, where parents are prioritizing their presence in their children's lives, even in the smallest way, can make a huge, you know, monumental difference in the future in terms of getting them away from these devices and staying connected with, you know, real people in real time.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Regarding like devices, like in the home, or if kids have like laptops or PCs, whatever it is. I think there was a comment earlier. I think Ms. Toya brought it up. Like until your child is able to make money, earn money, and pay for their own technology and their own streaming internet service, as a parent, that is your device, right? And so you have every right to go through and periodically check, you know, check the device, check the apps, check whatever. You know, that's still part of your domain as a parent. I feel like we've lost that, where parents are like, "Oh, I don't want to invade the privacy of my child." I'm like, "Oh, your child's doing online."
Oh,
you know, I mean,
never.
You have no idea what your kid's doing online, you know? And I'm like, no, that's your responsibility. So
absolutely.
I feel like that's totally been lost in this like modern day parenting, you know, devolution, right? We're going backwards. And so I think that's number one. And then number two is helping young people, you know, when they are ready to actually finally access social, but like my kid's not on social media yet. He does do video games, that came up earlier. So there's a whole like social media aspect to video games, obviously Roblox being the kind of earliest one, but then they get into, you know, Xbox or whatever they're on, you know, the Discords, and it's a tricky world. But I think the important thing is just to, you know, have conversations with them, check their content, do periodic checks of what they're searching for. There are tools out there where you can actually monitor their use across different platforms. It's a more like tech related thing, but I think, you know, that's definitely important. And then we were talking about, I think that's, let me see if there's something else that came up. I think that's it for me right now. I'm just reading some of the comments. The key is sharing the resources with parents. Yep. Yeah. So parent to parent connections for sure. Making sure that you're lifting up other parents and informing them, because there are, I mean, especially, you know, some of the, you know, parents that say like migrant parents that are from other parts of the world that come here and their sole purpose is just like working, right? I don't have time to understand all this technology stuff, and their children are growing up in this like technology world, right? And so that can be very tricky too. But I agree, like getting your kids outside, talking to them, getting them working on projects, hands-on projects, whatever it is. I've had my kid for the last 2 days working in the yard with me. Yesterday he did like 3 hours. Today he did 2. We're pulling weeds, planting stuff, you know, and it's hot. He's like, "What are we doing this for?" And I'm like, "It's summertime. This is what we're doing. You're working. You know, you're gonna get your hands dirty. You know,
becoming a man or an adult or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you gotta do stuff you don't want to do sometimes."
That's exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, we are at 3:54, 3:55. Should we go into closing thoughts? It's been a very interesting conversation. Yeah, let's wrap it up. So closing thoughts, not just on the tech piece, social media piece. We talked about that. We talked about the kind of idea of, or pushing back on the idea that like, you know, reinforcing the idea that kids should be outside, and that can look very different the roles that schools play, the roles that families play. Some really good sharing in the chat around different ideas. So yeah, let's roll off into closing thoughts. Who would like to go first?
Charles.
Okay, cool. That just means one of y'all got to close the show out. It's fine with me.
I'm
Jubilee's
throwing it back
closing.
to you when I'm done.
Yeah,
Jubilee's closing.
Jubilee is closing. There you go. That's what you get. Ha ha. So I think this is a great episode, and I think it's a great topic, and I think these studies are confirming what we already kind of knew, but it takes away the ability to feign ignorance, as we start to see more and more of these consequences roll out. Again, I think that social media, I think the technology, I think it's a blessing. I think it's a huge blessing. I mean, I have more information than Socrates and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X in this device. Like, there's so much that I can do, but again, those swords cut both ways. And we talk about who's responsible. I like that the conversation started with schools and education and all this stuff and technology, and then transition to the home, because listen, off of one ear, we'll say, look, schools shouldn't be teaching morality or doing this or doing that. And then in another voice would be like, well, they shouldn't allow this to happen there. And it's like, that answer can't keep changing on what's convenient. And at the end of the day, the only people that have to deal with the consequences of that, or that are truly responsible, is you and your family. That you're the only ones that really got to deal with whatever that aftermath is. So we have this stuff. Once you know better, you do better. And that don't mean that, like, you're going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Like David just said, I don't know this shit. Like, I'm trying to learn it myself. But here's what we're going to do in the meantime. Like, you got to try. Like, there's an effort. And I do know that there are some people that just are not trying. There are some people that are allowing iPhones and iPads to raise their kids. There just are. There just are. And, the same way I used to drink fucking Kool-Aid with a gallon of sugar inside of it, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, which was the norm at the time. You quickly learn that's not okay. And as a result, I have to make myself drink water. Like, I am damn near 40 years old, and I have to like make myself drink water because I became addicted to that stuff. You know what? I'm also from a community where hypertension and high blood pressure and diabetes runs rampant. You know what I'm saying? So just because something is convenient and it's right there, and systemically it might not be our fault that those things are happening, it's Black people that got to get that foot cut off. And so, so what is you have to look into the future for your children, and you have to say, what is the equivalent of the foot cut off from diabetes in this instance? And you have to try to solve for that and do the best you can. Those are my final thoughts, and I think it was a great topic, David.
Cool. Thank you. I think interesting topic. I think we do need to pay attention to this at all levels, because, we talk about like young people, people that we talk about on the show, Latino children, African-American children, low-income children that have one shot at education, and young people in general too, that are experiencing adolescence you have one shot at adolescence, and that kind of wires your brain for the rest of your adult life, right? And so if social media, now that we know, is playing a very a big part in how that develops, like, we have to pay attention to it, because I think, like what you said, Charles, like if the impact on communities of color is always greater when something happens in the larger ecosystem, right? And so we have to pay attention to this. I think for parents, you're a parent, you're a caregiver, you're an elder, and you have to make sure that you are monitoring what young people in your care are doing online. And so I think taking that sphere back into the control of adults around you is something that we should definitely be doing. And I think schools can continue to play a role in this. I was just thinking back, and I did a quick Google search. So when I was a high school principal in East Oakland, California, I'm going to throw out a date to you, right? It was 2008 or 2009, right? I'm leading this high school in East Oakland. Snapchat had just started. MySpace was already kind of becoming outdated, and Facebook was just coming on board.
Yeah,
And I
Snapchat
knew
was
that
around at that time, brother.
well, it was. No, the kids were on Snap.
Not while MySpace was gone and dead with dust on it for a minute.
Okay, so yeah.
Not
So it was
sorry,
like,
I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. I got
no,
you.
it's okay. It's in the in between.
I
Okay, so
got
maybe
you.
it was a little later. It was like 2010 or 11, right?
Okay.
And so I know the kids were using Snapchat because it was like the one with the images or messages that disappear, right? And I'm like, it never really disappears. And so we we adopted a platform at the school called Edmodo. You may have heard of Edmodo. I don't even think they're still around, but Edmodo is basically a mock up program of Facebook, and you could, it was controlled to the school. Kids had accounts, and we taught kids how to use social media professionally, appropriately, especially considering that they're going to be going to college, right? Let's do like a trial run and see, monitor your comments and like give you suggestions on how you could have said things differently because it's all public, right? And so we actually did that work at the school, and it was very invaluable to a lot of the kids. And so I think there are different things that schools should be doing. They can't look away, and they have to figure out how to engage on people on these issues. And so, last thing I'll say is like, for any parent or caregiver out there, check your kids' devices.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
For sure.
Jubilee, take us all the way home and close the show. And you're doing it on episode 99, meaning that the next episode is 100. So David and I
No
got
pressure.
you. Best of luck.
You know what, Charles? I'll get you after this, but that's fine. No problem. So one, I'll say, please do not let go of the reins. This is for parents. This is for educators. This is for caregivers. If you let go of the reins concerning social media usage, pick it back up, because we are the buffers. We are the filters. And so number two is the streets ain't safe, and neither is social media. None of the social media streets ain't safe, and neither are the streets. Neither is safe. So both need to be actively and aggressively monitored for the sake of our children and their mental health and their social emotional development. Three, and let's not wait for the government to do it because they're not, and that's that. Three is, if you need to reset, like I said in the beginning, who's the master, right? So the parent of the home or the head of the classroom or community center or whatever, I always reserve the right to reset. If there is a routine that's going on connected to social media that causes children to be on there too long, exposed to all of this stuff for too long, you reserve the right to reset and say, you know what, I noticed y'all on this for 3 hours. We need to get that down to 30 minutes, right? And have real candid conversations with children, adolescents about the why behind it. Be okay with resetting. It's never too late to reset. And then the last thing I'll say is we didn't talk too much about children in this, but they also have a responsibility. And so I teach my children about digital responsibility and what that means. So it's like a report card, in my opinion. And I tell them that what you post and what you put forth in that is practically undoable. You think that you're deleting something, you think that you're able to erase it and make that quick edit before somebody sees it, but somebody's already seen it. And so the question that I ask my children is, who do you want to become and how do you want to be represented digitally? You have a responsibility to represent yourself in a way that aligns with your values, who you are, and who you're becoming. And so our children also have responsibility in this. And for the most part, many of them, by the time they log on to this, not the 8-year-olds, right? But they are in a place where they can be held accountable in that way. Oh, and the last thing I'll say is presence is powerful. Nothing replaces the presence of a parent, of a caretaker or giver or community worker, anybody who is in contact with our children. Nothing replaces our presence in their lives, our conversations in their lives. I am Jubilee. You got Dave. You got the doc, Charles. And you have tuned into the South Star Classroom episode 99. We are out of here. See you episode 100 next week. Peace.
Peace.